Strawberries and cream, another classic combination, but also two beautiful colours. And we will be showcasing these in a clasped warp over 2 towels. I hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, it's Steph and welcome to another video, the third in the towel series for 2025. This is the equipment that I'll be using for this project, my 60cm or 24-inch loom, one Heddle. I'll be using the bigger boat shuttle, not the smaller one, some scrap yarn and some cardboard tubes just to cover the knots in the weaving, my warping hook, scissors, a simple measuring tape and a flexible measuring tape that I can clip to my weaving so that I know when the first towel stops and the second towel begins. The colours I've chosen are brick and cream. These are from Maurice Broussard and are 8/4 cotton, which is my preferred for towels because I like my towels soft and squishy. So I usually put all of my cones on this repurposed ribbon holder that I use when I'm warping to keep the cotton stable, but because we're doing clasped warp, I'm only going to put one on the holder and keep the other one on the table. And I'm going to show you how to do this step by step, and it really is quite easy and very, very simple. Now with your second colour, with the yarn on the table, what we're going to do is make a very simple overhand knot in the end, and we're going to pop that on the first peg. If you're using a traditional peg, you would just pop that straight onto your normal peg, but I'll be using it on my repurposed coat rack that I use as my pegs when I'm warping. And then we're going to place the yarn in the middle of the table and then head up the other end. I'm going to secure my loom to the table as I normally do with the clamps. The length of the warp is 1.9 meters or 76 or so inches, and that's for 2 towels. I'll be using my 10 dent reed for the project, and I will be centering for a weaving width of 50 centimeters or 19 3/4 inches. As always, I like to secure my apron rod to the heddle. This just helps with tension and keeping everything nice and even as you're warping. Now I'm going to tie on with the first colour, which is the brick red colour, and we'll just be warping through the slots. So we're going to pull this first thread through, but when we get to our other yarn in the middle of the table, we're going to put the other yarn through that loop, and then we put the other yarn on the peg and loop that around the peg. Then we're going to reposition that second yarn to roughly where we want that next loop to go. So once again, we're going to do the loop through the slot as normal. Then when we get to the cream yarn, we're going to pop the cream yarn through, reposition it, and this is what it's going to look like here. So as I said, so simple. As with a lot of weaving, it looks more complicated than it is at times. I was completely random with the placement for both colours, trying to get a really good mix of close up, far away, and also in the middle. If you're an experienced weaver, I know what you're thinking. We haven't used 8/2. So normally for a clasped warp on a rigid heddle, you would use a smaller yarn and then double it and thread through both slots and holes. But for this project, we're only going to be threading through the slots, and I have a fix for the other problem, because what we have to do is treat each doubled yarn as one thread. It'll make it a little bit easier to understand when we're threading, but we can't separate those yarns. The way that I'm showing you today makes it really super simple and perfect for beginners, but for transparency, this entire project came about as the result of one of those happy little accidents. When I did the sample, I realized at the threading stage that I wouldn't be able to separate the threads. So I had to come up with a different threading technique, which worked out beautifully and resulted in this beautiful pattern. Sometimes when we make mistakes or push things a little bit too far, it results in some innovation and different thinking, which always brings in new and wonderful things. I love pushing the boundaries and finding ways around problems, and I rarely listen when someone says that I can't do something. When warping is finished, do the same thing we did at the beginning for the cream yarn. So just knot it and pop it on the peg and then tie off the other end on the apron rod as we normally would. Then it's time to unhook the apron rod from the heddle, unclamp the loom from the table and wind on. I normally use brown paper for my warp separator, which is just shopping bags that I've repurposed. And when it's the length of my dining table, I'll always wind on direct towards the pegs. And before I wind on completely, I just wanted to share what I'm going to do with the weft. So the first half will be a white weft, and that means that it will be a white towel with lots of red drips, and that would be, if you like, a little bit of strawberry with your cream. And then the other towel will be a red weft, so that's for, if you like, just a little bit of cream with your strawberries. So for threading, we need to keep each doubled thread intact. And here I want to show you that with threading, we're going through one slot, one hole, missing one slot and one hole, and then threading one slot and one hole. So to do that, we're just going to grab every second doubled thread and we're going to pop it into the hole just to the right of that slot. And then we're doing exactly the same again. So every second lot of doubled threads, we're just popping through every second hole. And that's it. Threading is super simple and easy, and this is why I think it's beginner friendly. This way we keep all of those doubled threads together, and this will result in a faux basket weave. And when I say faux basket weave, it just looks like a basket weave on the loom, and I will show you that a little bit later. It's not an actual basket weave at all. Once you've got your threads done, then I like to grab 4 and then pop a knot down the bottom ready to lash on. And this is what it's looking like. So I'm using the lash on technique, which is my preference for any project that doesn't need a fringe. So I'm getting some scrap yarn that's around 4 to 5 lengths of the loom, tying one end to the apron rod, and then I just wind up about half into a yarn butterfly just to make it easier to handle. Then to lash on, I grab a group of threads, divide in half, pop the scrap yarn through the top, around the bottom of the apron rod, and then I pull tight. And I keep doing this across all groups, across the warp, pulling tight as you go. And this really helps the yarn tighten up on the back beam. This helps to keep your tension nice and even. So if you tighten up now, your tension will stay even throughout the weave. Once I've got all of the sections done, I then go through and tighten up each little section. I can do this several times until I'm happy with the tension. And to check the tension, we just want to strum the warp behind the heddle, just with your fingers, and that will tell you where there's any slack areas or any areas that you might need to fix and tighten up. I then spread the warp, and I just do this normally, even though we've got some skipped dents and some skipped holes. I'll just do 3 picks without beating, so heddle up, heddle down, heddle up, then beat those 3 picks down to the knots, making sure that the line down the bottom is nice and even, so you've got a good starting point for your weaving. I then repeat, so heddle down, heddle up, and then heddle down, and then beat those 3 picks down as well. And that's all I normally have to do to spread the warp. So the first towel will just be a plain white or cream weft, and I'm using the bigger boat shuttle for this one. Of course, you can just use your normal shuttle. And I did the initial weaving as a single weft, which is what I was going to do. But after I'd done a few picks, I was looking at it and thinking it didn't quite look right. So I ended up doubling the weft, and this worked out really beautifully. I will show you what this looks like in a close-up, and I'll also show you how to double your weft without doubling it on your shuttles. which I've always found a pain. But first, of course, I'm covering all of the knots with those cardboard tubes, and that just protects your weaving and stops those knots from poking through and distorting your weaving. And because this is quite an open weave, we definitely want to make sure that they're well covered because they will distort it. I'll also attach my flexible measuring tape, and this just helps me stay on track with where I need to change colours for the second towel, and each towel will be 31 inches long. So here is a close-up where you can see the doubled weft compared to the single weft down the very bottom, and the doubled weft just gives it this faux basket weave effect, which feels phenomenal. So here's how you do the double weft. You throw your first pick as you would normally, and then beat and put your heddle back in exactly the same shed, in this case heddle up. Then I'm just going to go under that first warp thread, and that just means that we're catching that warp thread. Then I'm going to beat and pop the heddle in the down position, throw my first pick as normal, beat and then put it back in the down position, and then I'm just going to go over that first warp thread. And that means that you can double your weft without having to worry about doubling it and doubling your yarn on your shuttles. So when I got to 31 inches or 79 centimeters, it was time to end that first towel and begin the second. So I popped in a couple of picks of scrap yarn and then started the brick red color. This is what it's looking like now, and it still feels amazing. I can't get over how much different this feels to normal weaving. The texture of this weave on the loom is just amazing. I really wish there was a tactile vision so that you could feel it. And I can't at this stage wait to see how it turns out after wet finishing, and spoiler alert, it just turns out beautifully, and I can't wait to show you. But here I just continued on weaving with the brick red colour, doubling as I go, and I'm going to show you a close-up just very quickly on how to double that weft. So I throw my first pick as per normal. This shed is in the down position, and then you can see that we've gone under that first warp thread. So we're just going to go over that first warp thread and then throw your pick as per normal. In the opposite shed, you do the opposite. When the second towel had reached 31 inches or 79 centimeters, then I just put a few picks of scrap yarn in and then cut the weaving from the loom. I like to cut just small groups at a time and then knot up close to where the scrap yarn is, and that just keeps everything nice and secure through the wet finishing process. I always like to wet finish before I hem, just to keep the hems nice and neat, and then they're less likely to buckle. And here is an awkward close-up on what the weaving is looking like straight off the loom. I wet finished this in my washing machine and popped it through the dryer, and everything is closed up beautifully, and we've just got this beautiful textured finish. It's so nice. It feels light but also really soft on the hand. Anyway, I trimmed off all of my ends and gave the weaving a really good iron, ready for hemming and sewing. To prepare the towels, I'm zigzagging at the beginning and the end of the weaving, and also either side of the scrap yarn in the middle, and then I'll be able to safely cut the two towels apart without the weaving unraveling. And I've also got a nice neat zigzagged edge ready to turn up for a hem. Also, it's good to note that you don't have to use a sewing machine if you don't have one. You can also secure your weaving with a whip stitch, cut everything apart and then hand sew your hems as well. Always good to know. To hem the towels, I'm just simply folding up the zigzagged edges twice, pinning in place across the whole hem. When I get to the middle, on each towel, I'm placing these handmade fabric strips. These are just cheap ones that I got from Amazon, and they just make a nice finishing touch to your weaving as well. They can also be used to hang your towels. If you've got family and friends who like to hang up their towels, they can be used for that as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all so much. If you found value in this video, please click that like button and please subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.